The ether. A fertile plane of existence, in which a master cultivator navigates an ocean of stars. With him, his apprentice, a young mage who will soon discover all is not as it seems, as he unveils the tales of the verse. In a corner of the ether, there lies a humble plane. The task that you will need to perform may surprise you.
Of course it will. And what spell will I need to prepare?
No spell required, but you will need this.
You're kidding. A rock? Is it magical or does it speak? What would show me?
That is for you to discover. When you arrive, you will find a clearing. There will be a large stone resting by a tree. Here, you will wait.
The light faded from Horus's view, revealing the great wood that the master had described. It was a remarkable sight to behold, filled with lush greenery, tall lumbering trees, and clear blue waterfall, no taller than the nearest tree. Wind whistling through the trees could be felt as it passed by. In a meadow, not far from where Horus was sitting, the buzzing of bees could be heard. And most satisfying of all, the light that crept through the branches seemed to illuminate with peace. The only thing that appeared out of place was a small, sickly-looking crevice at the base of a nearby mound. No greenery grew around it. The only signs of life were a strange kind of shroom that glowed an odd green. In spite of the fact that Horus didn't know exactly what he was meant to do there, he knew there were definitely worse places to have to sit and wait. Little did he know that beneath the very place where he sat, a mighty drama was unfolding. One which would decide the outcome of an entire realm. We've come to offer peace, if we are allowed to live with freedom, Alluvian declared to the dark cave before him.
Freedom. Freedom. Disease that breeds weakness.
A voice from the darkness replied. Alluvian shifted uncomfortably as he heard the response. He was taller than most ants of his species, and wore a red scarf which hung around his neck and draped in two strands down his shoulder, and also his back. Two swords hung on his left, which had the appearance of iron, the hilts of which were wood, wrapped with a crude but elegant weave of bark fibers. He looked to his three companions, as if the correct response might be hidden in their faces. This wasn't the first time he had spoken with the Horde. They had, in fact, assimilated most of his own colony, but Alluvian had continually resisted. With him stood his most trusted companions. Chaff of the Wind, foremost and wisest of the moonlit moths, stood with his swirled staff. He looked on with wide eyes, his gossamer wings twitching nervously, which gave way to tiny swirls of dust as he did so. To Chaff's left was Alvaria, queen bee and foremost of all the bee colonies. She was a proud but sensible queen, never allowing her emotions to cloud her judgment. Yet, as she stood with Chaff, she too was fearful of replying to the horde.
Says the one who's riddled with blight and spreads it like fire wherever they go.
Mandaria Vespina, the wasp emissary, was never one to be trifled with and rarely minced words. She had little tolerance for anything she found morally repugnant, and the horde fell perfectly into that category.
Either accept these conditions or feel the sting of our justice.
Mandaria pointed her spear at the dark void before them, as though it were a single individual. Luvian, with a look of reason, wore an expression that pleaded for some measure of temperance.
No condition. Only the horde.
We're wasting our time. We either begin and finish this battle or we'll be bored to death by this mindless conversation.
Please, Luvian quietly insisted to Mandaria. You must let me try. Mandaria retracted her spear and took a half-step back.
Fine. If you insist on pleading to madness, I will hold my stinger.
With a gracious nod, Luvian returned to his attempts at diplomacy. If you wish to live as you will, so be it. But why do you not allow us the same privilege? For a moment, the horde said nothing, as if processing the response.
We will allow you to become one with the horde.
And if we choose not to join you, and consume the spores of the horde, what then?
Then you choose death.
The four of them became unsettled at the response, except Mandaria, whose quivering antenna appeared to hold back her agitation.
I, of all rulers, certainly can see the value in a colony.
Alvaria interjected.
But why must you be the only one?
There is only the horde. All must be consumed by the horde. All that resists will be consumed. The horde is
It is clear, then.
Chaff said suddenly.
This foul blight will not cease its conquest. If we do not act now, it will spread throughout all of Altaria.
Luvian, feeling this to be true, announced to the horde with a vigorous voice. If this is what you choose, then you leave us no choice but to conjure death on this day.
Death! 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 Consume. You will be consumed. There is only the Horde.
As the Horde said this, a lone creature lumbered out of the darkness. It had a horrific and frightening appearance. What looked once to be an ant was now an emaciated form. Fungus-like roots protruding from its back and sides. Pale green eyes that gave a slight glow in the darkness. And a constant ooze seemed to dribble from its mandibles. The creature was speckled with a sickly grey moss that had the appearance of a ghastly hair. And as he approached, the sound of the Horde moving together toward them echoed through the cave.
The Horde is all. There is only the Horde. The Horde is all. There is only the Horde. The Horde is all. There is only the Horde. The Horde is...
As more began lumbering out into the dim light, Alluvian could make out creatures of various shapes and sizes, all bearing the same color, infection, and soulless look in their eyes as they continued to chant as one. And before the Horde could reach them, Mandaria, in a decisive motion, cut in half the foremost infected of the Horde.
I've heard enough. We must take flight. Alluvian, take my arm.
In a swift leap, Alluvian grabbed the arm of Mandaria, and the four of them flew off. And as they took to the air, the Horde, like a creeping shadow, slowly poured out of the dark cave. Before long, Alluvian and his 3 companions returned to the great and last remaining army of the free creatures of Alteria.
They're back! They're back!
Speck announced, who had been anxiously watching for their return. The little ladybug approached them as they landed, jumping up and down with excitement.
What happened? What happened? How many did you kill? Did they surrender?
Alluvian, relieved to see Speck, but wishing for him to be calm, said simply, "You have a stout spirit, Speck. But now is not the time for our stories." Rushing to reach the council, Alluvian, Speck, and the others made haste to reach a small stump of wood that formed a table. Gathered around were 2 larger creatures who bore menacing appearances. One was a mantis lord, tall, slender, and colored with a jade green. The other, a bulking beetle with a mighty, long horn, who was known simply as Cluster.
I assume negotiations went as expected?
Cluster bantered. Glancing with annoyance, Alluvian announced, "They do not desire peace. They only desire one thing."
And what would that be?
Menodius, the Mantis Lord, inquired.
To die in battle or be consumed, to which I gave them a better alternative, to feel the tip of my spear.
She raised her spear in defiance.
Yes,
Chaff interjected.
and now, because of it, we are at war.
The whole of the council grew silent, quietly listening to the distant marching of the Horde.
And what action shall we take in light of this?
Is it not obvious?
Cluster said as he slapped his bone club into his left hand.
We need to help them see the error of their ways.
We need to show them the sharp end of my stinger.
Mandaria quipped.
Perhaps we were being hasty in this fight.
Beginning to look quite worried, Alvaria continued.
Let us not forget we are vastly outnumbered in this battle. And we cannot forget that this is another colony. They too live and breathe and act as one, no different from my own colony. Perhaps...
Perhaps what? Do you not remember? Were you deaf during that conversation? They do not care for our well-being. They are not some nation looking to teach us their ways. They are a mindless swarm, an endless abyss of hunger and consumption. They do not care for queens or pollen or honey or things that grow. They are here to end us or consume us.
It is easy for you to say, my people are not warriors like yours. They are honey farmers and pollen spreaders. When they sting, they fall. Of course I do not side with this swarm. They do not value work or life as we do, but I must look in the interest of all colonies.
Please. You're the one who hides in her own hive as her people labor and die for her.
This argument is the very thing that has diminished our numbers. None of us would be here if we had remained enemies to one another, as was our tradition. I myself was more guilty than most, for I too came and went as I pleased, and lived only for myself.
After Menodius said this, Chaff quickly added on.
The irony is that we who value choice as much as we do not have a choice. We must fight. If we wish to preserve our way of life, we must be unified as they are, if not more. We forget that it is the unity, Altaria, our people formed as one, that gives us our strength. If we are divided like my people before, we would already be dead. It is from the strength of both leadership and skill of war that we can win this battle.
Silence immediately fell upon the council. All pondered the choice that now lay before them. Suddenly raising his tiny wooden sword, Speck declared,
I'll show them the sting of my blade.
Alluvian placed a friendly hand on Speck's wing, and with a reassuring glance, he simply stated, For Altaria. And he raised his swords in both of his right arms, repeating once again, For Altaria!
May the Creator be with us, and over all of Altaria.
The council all stood in unison and repeated the declaration.
For Altaria!
They stood upon the mound, gazing over the sandy plateau. Moving in the distance, the horde advanced. Ceremoniously, Alluvians stepped forward in front of all of Altaria and witnessed the humble grandeur of their ranks. Mighty beetles with clubs and axes, moths with their mystical dust and enchantments, wasps and bees buzzing above them in the air, mantis lords towering with large staffs and spears, and many an ant and lowly beings from every corner of the realm, eagerly waiting for the battle to commence.
Let this be the day!
Alluvian declared. that we shall prevail! Turning toward the horde, Alluvian cried out, "For Altaria!" The horde army rushed toward the army of Altaria in a zombie-like motion. In mere seconds, the two armies collided, and blades fell upon their foes. Alluvian dashed forward, cutting down 4 foes at once. Although individuals in the horde appeared immediately to be weak and frail, falling with every stroke of Alluvian's blades, they were countless in number and seemingly endless. Alluvian continued to press forward, calling for his comrades to rally. "Press on! We shall cut them down by every strike!" The further Alluvian went, the more the dark brown mass grew in enormity. Some of the horde army even seemed to become more vicious and of more variety. Increasingly larger creatures began to emerge from the dark cave. "Come! We are breaking through their ranks! Let us!" Alluvian turned back, and in horror, realized his mistake. The army of Altaria had only cut a path into the middle of the horde, and were now hopelessly surrounded. Cluster held off the left flank while trying to keep one of his brothers from being pulled in. Manodius stood impaling a large horde centipede as it wrapped itself around his torso. Mandaria viciously fought, attempting to protect Queen Alvaria, having lost her soldiers who gave up their lives to use their stingers. Chaff bravely stood next to Alluvian, who now realized he was farther from safety than everyone else. But none of it could hide the most haunting scene displayed on the battlefield. Speck's broken body lay motionless at the foot of the two armies. As he looked away to save himself from the despair, he could see below them the opening to the cave, and the never-ending blackness of their enemy that continued to pour out. In spite of their skill, and all of their sacrifice, the struggle seemed hopeless. Chaff, noticing Alluvian's moment of despair, pleaded ceremoniously,
By the Great Maker, let us be found worthy.
As all hope seemed lost, and a wave of horde fiends began to rush Alluvian and Chaff, a strange thing happened. A great, dark shadow covered the plateau, and both armies paused to look up. There before them, descending from the sky, came a great boulder, trailing a colorful mist behind it. Descending from the sky, it impacted the mouth of the cave, causing a great cloud of dust to blow over. As it settled, and silence draped over, Alluvian could see the mouth of the cave was shut. The mist that seemed to emanate from the boulder hung close to the ground and began to pour into the cracks and crevices around it. Alluvian, watching the spectacle, took notice at the horde closest to the stone. One by one they gasped and fell, as the moss began to burn from their shells. Slowly, the dark mass that seemed to exist in every direction had fallen to the earth. Those directly engaged with the Altarian army that stood away from the cave attempted to continue fighting, but they were now themselves outnumbered, lasting only a few minutes before they were overtaken and slain. In the momentary pause, when the fighting ended, Chaff spontaneously declared,
The Creator has heard us.
in a cheer of relief, the army of Altaria shouted together, with a solemn heart. Illuvian approached Speck's lifeless body. Chaff, stepping next to him, said reassuringly,
He will be remembered, Illuvian. So will this day.
With tears in his eyes, Illuvian replied,
Yes. And he will be remembered as the hero who led it.
Illuvian continued,
A new day dawns, and with it, a new beginning.
After the light faded, Horus briskly approached his master. "What was the point of that?" Horus exclaimed. "Don't misread my confusion, master. It was a beautiful grove, and not that bad of a place to sit idly. But you brought me back before anything happened." The master turned from tending to the flowers in the garden, then calmly and knowingly replied,
Did I?
By this time, Horus was getting used to the fact that nothing was ever quite what it seemed. Horus paused, tapping his finger to his lips. He began to pace back and forth as he pondered the question. "Well, I got there. I dropped the rock in some water by accident, but I spent the majority of my time there enjoying the beauty of my surroundings." The master continued to look at Horus inquisitively, but said nothing. Horus then began to recall very minor events that had taken place. Feeling somewhat embarrassed to recount them, Horus reluctantly continued, "I suppose there was this small infestation."
Really? And what was this infestation?
Well, there was this sickly kind of hole. To be honest, I didn't even think much of it. Until they started swarming out of the hole. So I saw they were disturbing the serenity of the grove. I used a simple spell on the rock, and I tossed it in to stop the hole and snuff them out.
Exactly,
The master cheerfully announced. Approaching and putting his arm around Horus's shoulders, the master led him toward an arched doorway, which held 2 large glowing doors.
This may help to explain things.
Entering in, light cast into the chamber, awakening the slumbering halls from a deep sleep. The whole corridor burst with life. It was as if the room felt the return of its master. The room was a symphony of activity, filled with innumerable objects, structures, spaces, and machines, that in great organization laid about the room. Shelves of countless glowing books, halls stretching beyond sight, large mechanisms at work, engaging in what? Horus knew not. And a great desk that seemed not constructed but grown into its form. Among all this, one structure stood out. A large pit carved with silver glass and moonstone, which seemed to reflect the light coming from the outside. As they made their way into the room, the master gestured toward the pit and said,
Here, have a look. This is the Eye Anundai, the Eye of All. It is a pool of gleaming water that, when peered into, will reveal that which you wish to see. However, the only way you may peer into its waters and see what you are looking for is to focus on the thought and believe it will appear.
As Horus followed his instructions, he leaned in and began to see an image appear in the pool. Doing this, Horus heard his master's voice, which seemed to move to the back of his mind.
Focus on the moment when you first arrived into the grove.
Horus found himself back in the beautiful clearing as before. Yet as he continued to watch, his perspective began to shift closer to the ground. Before him stood 4 figures at the mouth of a great and sickly-looking cave. There among the 4, one of them spoke.
We've come to offer peace, if we are allowed to live with freedom.
Alluvian declared to the dark cave before him. Horus became enthralled immediately with the scene that began to unfold in front of him.
Freedom! Freedom! Disease that breeds weakness.
A voice from the darkness replied.
Says the one who's riddled with blight and spreads it like fire wherever they go.